Okie dokie. I feel like I should be doing the anthem for those of you who are old enough to remember. Yes, it is Battlestar Galactica old school, because we are old school. We are fixers of the EMs. And Roanoke was known as the Magic City. Yes, we're at the Roanoke Pinball Museum. And we're going to do a little EM schoolin's. I've got some of my own personal games on the floor here. A few. Here they are, these four. Skyrocket, Out of Sight, Snow Derby, and Surfside. And you'll say, oh, almost all Gottliebs. Well, I got a lot of Bally's too, but anyway. Point being, we're not going to yammer on about what we do here, which is work a lot. You guys, if you've ever operated an arcade or anything like that, holy smokes. Folks, it is a labor of love, and I know why Tim Arnold, if you ever visited him, Pinball Hall of Fame, with his scraggly hair and crazy look and infinite energy, it seems, I'm getting that. I'm turning into that, because that's what this does to you. But, God bless him. And, if we don't keep the pinballs rolling, who will? So, hello, everybody. I see your text there. Yes, Thaddeus, Craig, Adam, Troy, everybody's here. So, what this is, and I'm using my phone. I know this is not the best thing, but it's what I got. That is the motherboard out of Old Chicago. We're going to use this as our example tonight of the technique, the Dremel 443, infamous, sometimes controversial, but generally once you try it, you can't go back technique. So, not that there's anything wrong with filing, it's old school and it works, obviously. We've been doing it for years. But, if you want to do something a little different, and I did, then, this is kind of what I came up with. And apparently the bingo guys also discovered it, too, on their own. So, hey, how about that? But, yeah, I was just playing with attachments. So, for doing relays, generally this is all you need to do, 99% of what you'll need. Now, as far as Dremels go, yes, you must be careful. This is the weapon of the Pinball Jedi. It is the Dremel Saber. And I use the 8220 cordless because cordless units allow you to maneuver around a little more easily. And this model has a good bit of power. It can cut through locks or anything you need. Don't ask me how I know that. This is the magic brush, as we've called it. This is the 443 carbon steel brush, which we will be using today to clean the contacts and just go over the basics. Again, this is basic stuff. A lot of you guys have already done this, seen this, maybe looked at the Nick's North American Pinball Tour stuff when I did it on Pinside, and you're like, oh yeah, I can do that. And it is easy, but mainly it's getting the touch knowledge. You got to put your hands on this stuff and get that knowledge, that only you can't really describe or Google, but doing it on video, hopefully we'll have a good example of how to do it. So I got Q-tips, I got isopropyl alcohol, cutters, needle nose pliers. Not the best, really. The best needle nose pliers are like the really, really thin ones, but this is all I got because my tools disappear here in the museum. This is a sanding flap wheel, and we're going to use that also for our relay work. And then, of course, a couple screwdrivers, and then your trusty switch adjuster. So let's get started. Waste no time, and we'll get right to it. So whenever I have a new EM come onto the floor, I always take the motherboard out, and I just go through it. I just rebuild everything, I clean everything, whether it is working or not. The point is to bring it back to, undo 40, 50 years of wear and tear and make it as new as possible. So I just rebuild everything. And there is a big span between a project, fixed, shopped, then there's a giant chasm over here, and then you have rebuilt and restored. So prices are also that way. Anyway, You know what I'm talking about if you've done this. So here we go. We're going to put this in the chute. We're going to see if this does it. Clap your hands if you are feeling it tonight. Okay, I should actually have some... If I put some music on, will they block me? Who knows? All right. So, relays. We're going to talk... This is going to be short and sweet because I'm here 70 hours a week. Okay. Here we go. We're going to take this relay out. And you can see... I've already gone through a number of these, and I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to bring these up close so we can see what's going on. So don't worry about that. I'll make sure and get good and close. In fact, let me, and again, I'm just doing this on the spur of the moment. I don't have my really good camera gear set up, which I will. And of course, if you're here for the Roanoke Pinball School, well, then it's all hands-on group stuff. But anyway, here we go. Hey, Jeff, how you guys doing? So, you can see these three relays are kind of bridged together along one of their little power lines here. So what I like to do is usually take all three of them off together so that they kind of travel together, because otherwise this acts like a tether and it's hard to get it out of there. So anyway, yeah, you got to take the motherboard out, David. You're correct. You don't want to bend over and like reach down in there unless it's just a quick fix you're doing. You really need to take it out and do the rebuild. So this relay has not been rebuilt yet. So what we're gonna do is unscrew it. Let's just get going here. All right, let's just get that screw out of there. 1, 2. Hello. Hopefully it's bright enough. And I'm going to bring this up closer to the camera so you can see what's going on, but I'll also explain what I'm doing. So anyway, you can see it's kind of tethered to that other one, so let's just go ahead and take the other ones out. And that way they'll all travel as a trio, like the Three Stooges. Man, I miss Three Stooges. They're so funny. All right. So, here we go. Number 1, number 2, and number 3. Hey Tim, how you doing? Tim Leonard up there in Seattle area. He's a cool dude. You know, all the people up in Seattle have this kind of cool energy going on, and I think I know why. It's awfully green up there. You know, it's all the green foliage, green nature. It's just a cool place. It's the first place I ever saw a sign spinner by the side of the road doing a little dance, and the sign said, "Cheap weed." All right, that's funny. All right, so anyway, and also look, there's a little dust here, so I can clean that up too. Why don't I go ahead and do that? Give me just a moment here. Oh my gosh, this is crazy. There's no... You know what? I'm not going to do it now. Don't have time. And there's no towels. Let's just get on with it. So let's get on with it. First things first, we are going to, yes, remove the switch stacks. Yes, indeed. So let's get down even closer still. Get to the business. Yes. Let's get right down on in there. Hey, Greg. How you doing? All right, this is it. Now, what will make that show up better, and indeed when you are working, is that you will probably want a card. Stick behind there so you can see what you're doing. Much better contrast. Now I'm going to bring this light down. Again, this is a spur-of-the-moment thing. In the future, I'm going to have a much more prepared deal. So this is just because you were asking tonight to do it, so we'll do it. Anyway, let's see how that looks on the phone. See if that is... And then we got some shadows there, don't we? Okay, let me bring that up a little closer so we have even more light. Let's see here. How's that? That's pretty good. Problem is, it's now not able to see. I can't see it. I gotta get this other light. Bear with me here again. I'm doing this live thing for the first time, so there's gonna be a little silliness here. We gotta get this lighting under control. All right. That should be pretty good. Okay. Now, first things first. God, this is just so silly. Okay. Now, relay. We have a relay. We haven't done anything to it. So, first thing we're going to do, and I have to, it's like a comedy of errors here. You can't see the labyrinth of wires and lights. I'm actually reaching through to do this. Anyway. All right. Let's just do this. And let's take it out. What are we going over? This is the most basic thing in EM world. This is just how to rebuild a relay, just how to rehabilitate it, and the thinking and kind of touch knowledge that you need to do it correctly. So relays are kind of the genesis of EM understanding. Putting your hands on them and getting familiar with them is, if you can do a relay perfectly, you can do like 90% of what is possible in EM land. So when you remove the switch stack, first thing you have to be aware of is this little biscuit. I call them biscuits, but these little switch biscuits here, sometimes the one on the bottom is kind of pops off, and you just have to keep an eye on that. Now, some people will take a pipe cleaner and wrap it around these things, or tape. Yes, this is a Bally. It is from a old Chicago. So there's nothing. It's staying on pretty well here. And generally, when I work on these, I don't tape them up or put pipe cleaner around them. But if it's your first time and you're not sure and you might forget, you can take one of these, wrap it around, and it'll keep all the little segments together. But I don't worry about it. So we have to get the switches out. So let's go ahead and do that first. And next we have to take the coil out, because we want to first examine how well the relay itself is doing. So I'm going to use a little socket part of our ding here. Goes on the back of the coil here, and you just remove that. You can loosen it. You don't need to take it completely out. Now, one thing, because it slides up on these, one thing to take note of is that there is a tiny little washer that is resting right here. It's right underneath. There's a star washer, and then there's a flat washer, and the bracket goes between the two. The bracket goes in between the two when you slide it back in. So just make sure that flat washer is sitting against the coil and the star washer is on the outside. Just something to remember when you put it back together. So why are we taking this apart? Why are we doing all this? Why don't we just fix what's broken and move on? Well, you can, and if you know what you're doing, you probably will. I'm just going to give you the complete process, and then you can omit or skip as much as you want. But I'm just going to explain kind of how these things should work, and if you want to go the full distance with them, which I usually do. There is another level, which is where people will take these completely apart, put them in a tumbler, and then they will come out looking like a piece of jewelry. Now that's something I would like to do someday, but that's kind of when I am like retired or something, because that really just takes a lot of time, and I've got so many games here. So first thing we want to check, we've got our relay out, is we just want to touch it like that. And it's just to test whether it feels soft. This is actually quite nice. But this is something that you can't see and you can't Google. This is something that your fingers are going to tell you. You're just going to have to learn what a properly tensioned relay ladder feels like. It's going to feel kind of responsive. It's not going to feel soft or sluggish by itself. And the spring here is doing all the heavy lifting to extend that ladder out. So, this one feels fine, but what if it wasn't fine? What if it felt a little sluggish, even by itself, even with no switches in it? Would you do anything? Anyone out there, would you do anything to adjust this, or just accept that it was sort of, Well, I found that I didn't like that. I don't like it if it just feels sort of weak. And so that does involve some surgery to the spring. And so again, I'm taking you through the complete process of rebuilding one of these things and doing everything that you might need to do. So let's say this was a little sluggish. Let's just say I didn't like it. And how do you retension the spring? So let's go ahead and remove the spring. And what you want to do is, when you retension a spring, and this is common EM knowledge, a lot of you know how to do this, this is very simple, but you actually will set a new set point on your spring with your fingernail. You kind of put your fingernail, and I usually use 3 turns. I think 3 turns is pretty good. And I'll go ahead and do this. I'll do it with 2 turns because that won't hurt anything. It won't hurt anything, and frankly, it will give me an opportunity to show you how to shorten a spring the right way. So what you want to do is you kind of set your fingernail in there. I'm going to set it at the 2nd turn, right there. Just kind of set it. And then you take a needle nose pliers, and this is going to be hard to do because these needle nose pliers suck. You really want thin needle nose pliers. These are far too thick to be doing this. But again, don't have all my tools here. So I'm going to try and insert it here as best I can. And I will show you if I can do it, if indeed I can do it. If not, I just need a better set of, maybe I do have a better set. This sucks. Hold on just a second. Or one other way is actually we can stick a screwdriver in here. Just whatever you can to get that set up. Okay. Now you want to protect the stack. You want to protect the stack. That is the part that you don't want. You want to be your new spring. You protect that with your thumb, and then you turn at a 90-degree angle. At a 90-degree angle, you actually, and I hope I'm centered on the camera here. You turn it, then you put your thumb on top of the stack. So this is the part that we've turned away at a 90-degree angle. Take your pliers or whatever you got. You can go ahead and pull it out as long as you're protecting it with your thumb. There you go. This gives you something to work with. Okay. Just bend the spring tab on relay to increase spring tension. Yes, you can do that too. You can just what Brian is saying. And again, this is going to be, everybody's going to add their 2 cents. It's like, I'm sure, you know, that's fine. There are 100 million ways to do it. But I assume he says what you can do is just bend this out, the actual bracket. Bend these tabs out, which extends the spring. And that is one way that would work as well. But that is not the way that I taught myself. And I am going to clip the spring right here. And then all we got to do is take our little needle nose again. You can see right there on the little white piece of paper, hopefully. And we'll bend it back. And now what we have, nobody is the wiser. We have a spring that is a little bit shorter. And it's going to be a little bit stronger. So that when we put it back on the relay, yeah, a little bit firmer. You don't want it to be too firm, of course, because then the coil won't be powerful enough to pull it in. So don't overdo this. This is an adjustment I make only to relays, which just, again, they just feel a little soft. And, you know, yeah, you can replace them. I guess that's a good suggestion, Jeff. You want to get one that has the correct tension and you don't want to use what you got, you could just replace a new one. But I find that I am resizing springs fairly often in terms of when I have to tune up steppers or anything else that may involve, or even score relays. Sometimes the springs get a little old and tired, and so, or maybe they just, even after you clean them up. So, so I find that adjusting springs like this is kind of a core skill, whether it's applicable to your particular need at that moment or not. So no worries on that. So anyway, I just do it as an example here to show you. This one technically didn't really need it. So, so taking the relay out, this is the really important thing. It gives you an opportunity. What you want to do, and again, let me get my, let's get the old alcohol and Q-tips, which is going to be a constant presence in your arsenal. Let's just use this just to clean it up. Just get the dirt out of there. Doesn't hurt. You have to do it? No. But you've already got it, so why not go ahead and just clean off all the dirt. Okay. This is tougher than I thought when you don't have a camera crew and you're kind of washing out your phone like this. I hope it's coming through okay. Anyway. All right. But the main thing we want to examine is inside of the ladder, inside of the relay ladder, right here. This is the point at which, you know, the relay operates like this, and the coil sits there, and that plate bangs against the coil stop. What's the coil stop? Well, it's this thing, please don't spill, right here on the top of the coil. So it's just a metal stop. And over thousands and thousands and thousands and millions, actually, of times, this thing will eventually develop a divot. It can actually cut into the, thanks, Craig, for letting me know. The coil stop, if it bangs into the relay plate enough, it'll actually create a divot. And in a lot of Gottlieb coils, you'll see, in this Bally, again, my screen is really washed out and I can't quite see if it's getting the light in there. Let me see if I can reflect that. You see there's a little, right there, you see there's a little erased dimple right there. And Bally put that on their relay plates so that it would strike the coil stop preemptively, whereas Gottlieb did not have these in their relays, and the coil stop just hits the plate and actually digs a kind of a hole or a little canyon in the plate, and then it winds up sticking. So if you have relays that are sticking, it may not be an electrical issue. A lot of the time people say, oh, it's magnetism, it's a magnet, the plates become magnetized. About 95% of the time, the plate is not magnetized. It is because this little divot has been cut from too much banging action, and it's just sticking. It's just like a little ridge. It's just catching the edge of the coil stop and won't let go. That's why when you tap it like that, it'll let go. If it was electrical, then it would hold regardless of whether you were doing that. So that's something to keep in mind, but this is why we take the relay apart. This is the number one reason, I would have to say, is even if you're really good at cleaning contacts and using the zip file and little, zipping that file in and out and cleaning the contacts, you're still not sure if this is good. So this is the only way you can be really sure that you don't have a possible little indentation here. So what do you do about it? Well, this one, and again, my phone is totally washed out, and I just can't see what I'm doing. Let's see, right there. So there we go. So that little divot looks fine, and you feel it with your finger, and you can just feel if it is smooth or not. And there's a little ridge on it. I don't know if you can see that. There's a little ridge from where the coil contacts it, but it's not jagged, and there's no real little danger of it sticking. But what if it was? Again, well, what would we do? Well, since this is our lesson, this is where I'm going to go ahead and smooth this out and show you what you would do just in case you had more significant wear on the backside of that relay plate. So what I'm going to do is take my little Dremel tool, and I personally use a little sanding flap wheel. This is a little thing I got from China. A little box of them is like 24 for, I don't know, $10 or something like that. I think it's about 120 grit. But I'll just put it in my little Dremel here. And yes, you guessed it, we are going to sand that guy smooth, very delicately, very gently. We don't want to bang it into the plastic and, you know, grind that away, but we just want to keep it on the kind of the wear areas and kind of a circular pattern. You don't want to make a new groove, you just want to smooth it out. So let's go ahead and give it about 20% power. I hope that's going to show it, okay? And I'm just going to smooth that guy out. Again, I gotta see what I'm doing here, so there you go. Just very lightly. So you might need more, you might need less, depending on what's going on here. Then after you sand it, you want that relay plate to be smooth. Of course, on these Balleys, you don't want to totally smooth off the little button. You just want to eliminate any kind of little ridge. Okay, there we go. You can see where the sanding wheel. Now we use the magic brush. Every time we sand something, we follow up with the polishing brush. Do you have to? Probably not. I do it because it's just better. It's just smoother, and you can feel the difference with your hand. You feel that? It's pretty smooth, but there's just a tiny ridginess there. So this, you can use a little bit of pressure. Literally, that's all it takes. It's just a little burnishing. And now, oh yeah, smooth as can be. So there's still a tiniest little ridge, but it's very, very smooth now. It's very, very, so the edges of it are very smooth. It's not quite jagged there. And it doesn't need to be totally flat. Again, this, you're looking for something that's going to stick. You're looking for a real edge that coil stop will get buried into and then have a problem coming back. And usually even if you test it, sometimes you can even feel it. So in this case, this is really just superficial wear. It's perfectly normal for this era of Bally, and if you want to smooth it out like I did, that's perfectly fine, but in any case, this really didn't even need that. So just showing you in case you have to do that. So taking the relay apart allows us to deal with that sticking problem. And a lot of these Williams games, in particular, I don't know why, but they have a serious problem with sticking relays. I ran into a bunch of people on the pinball tour who had player units latching up or player coin units and so forth that were just sticking, and they were just driven crazy looking at the schematics, and sure enough, it's just a physical issue with that. So that's all I'm going to talk about for that, but there you go. And then as far as the coil stop itself, you can take a little bit of, everything I do, it's meticulousness, so my process is I will swab it with a little alcohol to get the dirt off there. Sometimes there's some sticky stuff on these coil heads. You see that coil stops, people will fire a little WD-40, there's some kind of dirt or something in there, and that can actually be like a little sticky, and so sometimes that can even make a relay stick, if it's depending on the improper cleaning solution that they used. And the same story is true here. Some coil stops have these jagged little edges that if you put that right back in the relay, it's going to start digging in again. So this, you don't need to hit that with the sander. It's very rare that you would ever need to sand a coil stop, but polish it. Woo, that is now really nice. We're going to clean it off with Q-tip. And what we have, I mean, you can just feel the difference. You can, I can, you can't, but very, very smooth now. And, it's a small difference, but over thousands and thousands of games, it's just going to add a tiny little bit of reliability, in my opinion. So why not do it? This is all supposed to be an enjoyable process anyway, right? It's kind of pinball's in. So let's get on to the serious business here. Now we're talking switches. So, switches. what's the deal with switches? Well, EMs are not like computers. They have these switches, in a solid state pinball machine, there's a switch that tells the computer to throw the current to the coil. But in an EM, it's both the switch and the conduit to the current. That's why the cleanliness of the switches is so important, because it's both the signal, hey, do something, and then the power to do it goes through that same connection. So every switch in your EM, that's why you rebuild an EM, because it's like a string of Christmas lights. Every single switch and the health and the cleanliness of it is cumulative. And so a dirty machine, they're like Craigslist machines. They just feel kind of sluggish, kind of tired. It's like all the parts are made of felt. And you're like, gosh, these old machines really feel like they're just old. Well, it's just because it's going through a dirty switch and another dirty switch and another dirty switch and another dirty switch. And by the time it does something, there's not much left over for the action. So this process gets it back to where it was. Now, back in the old days, and actually I shouldn't say that, because there are still a lot of people who will file them. And again, filing the contacts works. It does work. It's quick. You don't have to take these things apart. You just zip your little cleaning stick in there, done, done. So why do this? Well, for one thing, these contacts are round, and it's like a round. I guess use my thumb, and I mean it's like a round surface that hits like this. If you go in and sand it, then what you're doing is you're kind of changing the angle, the strike of the contact a little bit, so that it may or may not be better, may or may not, but it is changing it. You are removing material when you do that, and that's something that I kind of just don't like. If it's not necessary, I don't want to do that. Secondly, it kind of creates a little dust in there and stuff, so it may be minor, but it's kind of, it's not as clean. Third thing is, by taking it apart, these little biscuits over time will kind of shrink and change, and so the tension, you see like this, see how the switch stacks themselves? The tension on the switch stack itself might be like this over time. Inside of, on a molecular level, these little biscuits might be kind of expanded or contracted, and there might be a little movement in there. Well, by taking it out, putting it back, and then tightening it down, we are establishing a new baseline for the switch stack. So we've dealt with any decades of possible humidity or shrinkage or whatever by taking it out, putting it back in. Another issue is that we can do something called switch bias. And this is something that some of the old-timers know about. Not everybody knows about this. This is really key. So, but let's work our way there. We've got 4 switches here. And the great thing about switches is that... is this driving you nuts? I keep adjusting the stupid card, and it just keeps falling down. Let me see if I can get that in here. I need a pinball assistant. Okay. Who volunteers? Okay, here we go. Hopefully that'll stay in place. All right. So the good thing about switches is that there's really only one way they can work. You don't need a schematic to figure out which way they're supposed to open and close. So if you look at the relay, you look at the armature itself, you see that that's open, and then the coil fires in, it's closed. Open, closed, open, closed, open, closed, and it's got these little slots to go through it, right? Well, in each of these switch pairs, one is the long one. So if the relay moves like this, then the way the switches are created, the way that this relay was built, basically tells you which way it can work. It can only work one way. In other words, when the relay fires, every switch should change from its default position to the other position. That's what switches do, on and off, on and off. So if you have a switch, let's say like this one here looks a little suspect, and the relay moves like this. See, it's not changing. It's closed. It's going from closed to closed, closed to closed, closed to closed. Well, it can't go from closed to open down there because it's physically impossible. So it has to start at open and then close. This one over here starts as closed, goes to open, closed, open. So we can see that that one is doing what it should do. But you don't need a schematic. You can look at all your relays and just do a fundamental binary check as to whether the switches switch. Go in and push, turn the power off on your game, press the little relay, and look with some good lighting at every one of these switches, and just make sure that the open one's closed, the closed one's open, and if you have one like this that doesn't do anything, stays closed, that should be open. Has to be. There's no other way it's going to work. So you don't need a schematic for that. That's a basic binary fundamental check that you can do throughout your game. And in any kind of stepper or motor or anything like that, it's that fundamental on and off that will determine whether it's configured correctly. And it'll save you a lot of time. So by taking this switches apart, we can see that this one is wrong. Don't need to look at a schematic for that. Same story would be true if, for example, this was too wide. And when the relay fired, it would go like this. Nothing happening. Is it supposed to close over here and then open over there? It's physically impossible. It has to close over there and open otherwise. So make sure your switches switch. Okay, seems simple, but that's something that you can take some time and look at all the switches in your machine. Just make sure they're doing what they should do. Now let's get to the nitty-gritty. This is the meditative thing I've been doing for, it's not a long time. I think I'm going on my 6th year with all this stuff, but it's been thousands and thousands of switches. Jeez. Anyway, you basically swab contacts with alcohol on a Q-tip. Just swab them. Okay? And if you really, what you really should do is just clean the whole thing. Just clean the entire, get all the dirt out of there. It doesn't hurt. Okay? Just get it all out of there. Then, take your 443 and you use light pressure. You don't grind it down. This is a very gentle tool, by the way. It's actually much more gentle than even sandpaper. There is an abrasive effect, but it's very, very gentle because of the way that the brush moves and the carbon steel brush is constructed, that it has a smoothing, burnishing effect. So it's really hard to screw anything up with this thing, and you can just give it some light pressure, and it'll be just fine. So I use this for smoothing any kind of metal. So let's go ahead and do a little. It just takes a little second. Just give it a little thing like that. Anything like that. Anything like that. That's it. Now, if you want to be a perfectionist, and I do this on my own personal machines, you can also clean. You can clean the outside contacts too. All that does is so that when you look down in your machine, it just looks real pretty. But totally not necessary. And then swab it again. So it's swab it, polish it, swab it again. That is the everyday. And I'm doing this a little slowly just to show you. As you get good at this, you will just breeze right through it without a problem at all. Okay. Now what do we do? Just put it right back together? No. Now we're going to introduce one of those trade secrets that some people have never heard of, but is nevertheless useful. And it's something I call switch bias. biasing. It's something we're going to do to the long switches, the long ones, before we put it back into the relay. What are we talking about? What do you bias what? What the heck does that mean? Why? Why should I do anything? So, here's the issue. The width. Oh, good point, Greg. I skipped that. Good point. Every once in a while, and this is another reason why polishing is easier, I think, even though it requires a little more work up front, than sanding, is because when you're polishing these contacts, you will see if they are vibrating, or if they're spinning. And that means that the crimp has actually come loose, that it's not firmly attached to the blade. And if that's the case, you need to fasten that contact back to the blade. Otherwise, you're going to get intermittent electrical contact, and that is a real annoying thing to track down. Trust me. So this is your opportunity to examine what's going on with the contacts. So yes, good point, Greg. If you want to watch these to see if the contacts are spinning or vibrating during the polishing process. Now, none of these were, but if that was the case, there is and there's different techniques that people use to crimp them back on there. You don't want to just use a tool like this, like your needle nose pliers, because these little teeth kind of on the end, you don't want to scratch or create pits in the surface of your contact. You really don't want to do that. So some people will take like needle nose pliers, they'll wrap it in cloth, press it down like that. There are some crimping tools you can use that will press it together. But the idea, there's a peening tool. The idea is that you squeeze the back of the contact where it's attached to the blade, and then it snugs it back up to the blade. Now, if you want to be a belt and suspenders person, and I frequently am, I will crimp it, and then I will also lightly solder it on the back. Reason being is that it could be the reason it's vibrating in there is because the hole at one point was enlarged due to some sort of short, and it actually destroyed some of the metal around the blade, so that crimping it won't be enough. And if that's the case, a little solder after you've crimped it in as good as it can get is kind of a belt and suspenders approach that you can ensure that contact is going to stay and be good. So good catch, Greg. That's very important. Very important thing to notice when you're polishing. Now, you won't find many loose contacts. I usually find maybe one every other game that I completely go through, maybe. So it's not a common thing, luckily. But when it does happen, you definitely want to address it. So be on the lookout for that. So let's get back to the biasing thing. Okay, so switch bias. These switches have a long blade, and the long blade go through these little slots in the ladder. Well, the issue is the slots on some of these games, depending on what year it is, are a decent bit wider than the blade that goes through it. And so what happens is there's actually a little bit of wiggle room. I'm exaggerating the effect, but it could be that there's just a little bit of ambiguity as to where the true center of that switch is. And if you have a game that vibrates or people kick it, it could be enough that it could cause a switch to switch when you don't want it to. Or at the very least, it just makes your gapping a little less accurate. So what we want to do, so the point of biasing is to ensure, and if this is, let's say this is the slot, my hand right here is the slot, and let's say this, in fact, I'm not even going to use that. Let's say this is your long blade switch, and this is the slot in the relay. So if you just put those switch blades in there could be a little potential for movement, and some games are worse than others. So by biasing the switch, what we do is we preemptively ensure that it rests against one side of that slot and has a more predictable movement and resting place. So we're going to do that before we put the switches back in, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. But which is the right way? That's another question. There's two directions. This is down towards the coil when the coil pulls in, and this is up
as the spring pulls it up, which is the right place. You want to bias them in the direction of the spring. You want to help the spring lift the ladder. However, this is a touch knowledge thing that you have to get right. You don't want to overdo this, because then you could create too much pressure. If you bias these things forward before you put them in here, it could create so much pressure that the coil is not going to be able to pull in. So it's a slight tilt. It doesn't take much, but it's enough to ensure reliable switch position when they go back in. It's a consistency thing. So this is something that some of the old timers I've talked to, they're like, yeah, I know about that. Anyway. So how do we do it? Whenever you adjust switches, and you have your little switch adjuster, you do it at the base. You do it where the switch stack is. You don't do it up here. There are cases in which, if you have a wavy switch, that you will want to kind of try and straighten it out and do your little adjustments up here. And there are some special cases, but that's not for today. In general, when you make switch adjustments, you do it down here at the base. So what I'm going to do is, to bias these switches and help the ladder lift, I'm going to rest this with about a little 1 degree. Yes, correct, Jeff. It also maximizes the amount of throw. So that means that if you're starting in the middle, and let me illustrate that. Jeff, good point. Good, man. We're all helping each other today. I love it. So let's see. Here's an example. Let's say this is the relay. This is the switch. If your switch starts here or here, and the relay pulls in, you lose all that motion before it finally pushes it. You see what I mean? If it's here and the relay activates, it doesn't really start moving until it gets to that point. But if it's here, you get the full action of the relay, a full good wipe, and you have more room to kind of configure the gap. Whereas if it's here, that'd be the worst position, because then it has to go all that way before it starts to push it. So good catch. That is another reason why we do this. So how much is too much? Too much is where you get too aggressive with it and then it just can't. I am just paper challenged today. This is ridiculous. Okay. And now the cord is in the way. Here we go. All right, don't move. Nothing move. Okay. Here we go. So let's adjust just a slight little, just enough to ensure that it rests against the side of the thing. It's like a little 1 degree turn, just a tiny little bit. This will fix this switch. This one wasn't even pointing the right way. There you go. Even this one that's together, we can give that just a little turn. We'll fix that when we gap it. So you can see there's a slight little tilt. That's as much as I would go, but that's enough to ensure that they all rest on the same side of the relay ladder. Pretty cool. Now let's put it back in, see how it's working. First things first, before you gap your switches, you do it in reverse order, meaning that the coil goes in before you gap your switches. Coil goes in before you gap the switches, because this, yes, correct, only the long sides, because those are the ones that go through here. And the reason we're doing that is because we want it to rest on that side of each gap. So yes, only the long blades get biased, because they're the only ones that will have a resting point inside. So coil goes in before you gap. Coil goes in before you gap, because, and I sometimes forget that, that's why I'm repeating this, because the coil has a stopping point that is a little shorter than an empty relay with nothing in it, which actually you can see it actually kind of goes backwards a bit. The actual stopping point might be here for the coil. A little bit of a difference. So if you gap it like that and you put the coil in and you find stuff doesn't work, it's probably because you gapped it before you put the coil in. So let's do that now. Put that back in. Yes. Thank you. Coil goes in before you gap. So we'll remember that there's that little on these ballies. Now, not every game is the same. This is from an old Chicago 1976 bally. Gottliebs are a little trickier. Gottliebs have 2 gaps per switch stack. That's right, 2. Oh, that's right, I should say. Yes, there's happy little switches right here, and these happy little areas here. There's only 4, but Gottliebs have 8. And so you have to be doubly careful that they go through the right one. Because okay, I'm going to stop the Bob Ross thing. Anyway, he Gottliebs, just to cover. See, Gottlieb has 2 slots for every switch stack. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This would have 8 slots in it. And it's tricky. You got to pay really close attention. Bottom stack, top blade, top gap. Second. Anyway, gap tool from Pinball Life. I don't even know what that is. Is that just is that like a reference thing? I don't know. We'll look at that. We'll look at that in a minute. Let's get back to where we were. Going to put the coil back in like that. Make sure that the washer is on the inside, the star washer is on the outside. Then you'll notice there's this little ridge here. Don't put it in like that where it's kind of sideways. You want that ridge to sit flat against the bracket like that. Then we tighten it. Pretty good and snug. Okay, now we can put our switches back in. Now beware, not all switch stacks are as simple as this one. Some of them are doubled up and they have a connecting wire between them, so you cannot take them out one at a time. You have to take both out at the same time and put them both in at the same time. Tricky. Takes practice. Take good photos. You'll get it eventually, but don't start with one. Start with the easy ones, get your touch knowledge, and then move on. So, this is very simple. Bally brackets have 3 spaces, 3 places you can put this in. Since this is just 1, it goes in the middle one. If it had 2, it would be on the inner one and the outer one. And you'd know pretty quickly because these are so close together, you can't really get 2 of them together. So we're going to put this in the middle one. And it's very, very simple. The long blades go through the long things there. This is also a touch knowledge thing. You will need to learn the finesse for getting these in the first time, but it becomes quite easy. It's just takes practice. And again, if you can do one relay perfectly, you can rebuild almost anything in EM land. So that's the payoff. Okay, now we're not going to snug it down tight just yet. Not going to snug it down tight, because what we need to do is make sure that if we look down the stack, which you want to do, you want to see that you're not getting this corkscrew kind of thing like that or like this. You want it to be straight. So we're going to make sure that these are all straightened up. And we can tighten them slowly. You can even put a little, you can tighten them up a little bit so that they're not completely loose. And then you just kind of feel, are they in the middle? Feel both switch blades as you go down. Kind of squeeze them together. Look down the stack and make sure we're adjusted. It's okay if they're a little bit leaning, but main thing is you just kind of keep them together. Again, it's a touch knowledge thing. And then we're good. And then we give it the final snug down. Yeah. Okay. Now, hey Matt, Old Matt Sedgwick, I love giving your story about when I was in Rhode Island. Everybody on the pinball tour was like, when they found out I was looking for a new city, they were like, oh, you need to move here because we got, you know, the most Taco Bells per capita you can imagine. I mean, it's just, this is awesome. And you, yeah, exactly. And you were the only one who was like, Nick, don't move here. Don't move here. Just don't. It's not your place. It's gonna eat you up. Don't do it. It's so funny. So funny. Anyway, yeah, Matt. He's always buying and selling games up in Rhode Island. So if you need an EM, talk to Matt. He's cycling them out all the time. Andrew Harris. I know a lot of you guys. A lot of you guys are awesome. We are all awesome. We're all EM people. I mean, we are keeping the world of classic pinball alive. This is important to get this knowledge out there. Okay. Yeah, I'm very happy with Roanoke. Holy smoke, this place is just awesome. It's so beautiful. Anyway, as soon as I get my pinball B&B together, I hope you guys will come down for a vacation. Okay, but that's news to come. Anyway, getting all the roofing done. Oh, my stupid card is going away. Okay. So now that these switches are installed and they're straight, you can also examine and just make sure that the contacts are centered. You know, you want to make sure that they're not like off center and they're touching like this. You want them to be stacked, that they're touching each other like that. So look at the switch contacts and make sure that they're aligned. And you can do some little, just look at them. Just make sure that they're centered. Okay, now we're going to gap it. Time for the gapping. The gapping. This is where we're going to need some really good light. And I think if I adjust this, I can eliminate that lower shadow, which has been bugging us the whole time. Let's give this a shot. Come on, right here. Just a minute. There we go. And now, oh yeah. Yeah. Get that up there. I'm surprised it's not brighter. I've got a ton of light coming on here. I'm surprised it's not brighter. Anyway. There we go. Holy smokes, that's what we want. Good. Should have done that from the beginning. Yes, correct, David. You are kidding. 53 machines, that's crazy. Okay, now, we don't want to ever adjust these long blades. We've already biased them so that they are sitting against this side of the... I know, we all have tons of machines, don't we? It's crazy. I know. I have 35, and I got to get rid of some. It's crazy. So, but that's cool, you know? You say, yeah, I got 35 pinball machines, baby. All right. And they're like, do they get Game of Thrones? Well, there is a Game of Thrones pinball machine. Oh, cool. So, yes, we will gap the smaller blades now. Not the big ones, the small ones. How much? This is where you will have to remember the little mantra. Now, first of all, this is another one of those little trade secret-y things. Maybe this isn't as much of one. Sometimes these relay ladders, these plastic ladders, get a little wear, and so there's sometimes a little wear here. The actual plastic moves, and so when you test right now, which is what we're doing, testing the gapping, you don't put your finger on the plastic part and push it. Put it on the metal part and push it, because this is how the relay will physically work. It could be that if there's some wear here, you could get an extra little, see, there's a tiny little bit of movement there. Don't push the plastic ladder, push the metal part of it. That will give you a true simulation of the action. Okay? All right. So let's look at what we got here. And lighting is key, and I sure hope you can see this. I'm gonna zoom. Can I zoom in? Can't zoom in. Nope. It is what it is, folks. Okay. I just hate these shadows. Let me see if I can improve it. Just 1 second. There we go. Let's get a little more light on here. Just a bit more. All right. There it is. Gapping, the all-important skill. Okay. Now, when you gap, here's the thing to remember. Gapping, I am going to throw the cords out the window. You guys, just send me a box of business cards. I can fill this whole place with it. Okay, I got to make sure this is even. There we go. I'm looking at my phone. It's kind of hard to do. Okay. All right. Now, here we go. What you want is you want the first half. Here's all of the movement that this relay allows us to have. This is all of the movement that we get. We're pushing it by the metal, not by the plastic. You can see why I spend 4 hours on relays, because, there's a lot to know. So anyway, we push the metal. We can see that this is the maximum travel that we get in this relay. Now, what we want is the first half of the movement should go from the initial state to the changing state, to the point where, like for example here, we want the first half of the movement to go from open to just touching. Then we want the second half of the movement to be pushing in. Got that? First half, touch. Second half, push. This is something that you will have to learn through touch knowledge and practice. Oh, thanks, Ken. Appreciate the WD-40. You're better than that. Ken does good work. He just finished a Matahari EM, as a matter of fact. Are you jealous? I am. I'd like to have one. All right. Only $8,000. I don't know how much. Anyway, so what about the closed ones? What about the closed ones? How are they supposed to act? Well, again, half of the movement, they should stay together for half of the movement, and then the other half should open. So you can see there's really not enough contact happening here. It's kind of letting go a little early. We want that to follow. We want to go to the halfway point, and it should still be touching, and then it should separate at the end. So does that make sense? This is a really important thing to grasp. Half the movement to the transition point, the other half should be pushing or separating. Let's do one as an example. This one here, let's look at it. And I got to look at it. Let's see. First of all, this switch is too close. This is the one that was suspect. It's almost touching now. Just a little too close. So we're definitely going to have to open that one up. Now technically this switch, once I open this up, is good enough to work. We're going to adjust again. We adjust it at the stack, adjust it at the bottom. Don't do it up here. We're going to just give it a little bend. And it's hard for me to do while I'm looking at this. Anyway, so what we have here, oh my God. I just don't want to move because you see, you guys, I'm holding a lot of stuff, and if I move, then everything falls apart with the lighting. So we're just going to have to struggle through it. Okay. So if you look at all the switches, we have an open going to closed, open going to closed. It's pretty closely gapped there, but it's still okay. So this would actually work as is. This would actually work. But I want it to be perfect. This is our chance to make it as good as it can be. So, an ideal switch, all of the contacts should change at the same time. That's one issue that the pros can look for. They should all change at the same time. It's very subtle. Doesn't have to do it, but it's just good practice. So, let's look at this one. How wide should it be in terms of a reference point? Well, first of all, the half and half rule will tell you that. halfway, other half push, halfway. We do it in slow motion. Let's go. Looks like it just touches there, and then it does a little push. It's actually just fine, but I'd like it to be a little bit closer. And in terms of how close it looks, it may be tough to see on the camera, but I usually put a gap in that's just about the same width as that switch contact, from the blade, from one side of the blade to the top of the switch contact, maybe even a switch contact and a half. Usually a switch contact's width is about and this is something you'll have to learn. You'll just have to learn by doing the 50-50 that will inform you as to where it changes at the best location. So let's try that. Let's look at that. Let's see how that works. Halfway there, touch, push. Halfway. Now, the early make, late break rule. Early make, late break. Oh, you want it to... Yeah, that's kind of what this is the 50-50 is just it's a way of thinking about how to instill that good wiping action way of doing it. It's just the way I'm explaining it, but essentially, let's look at that. That to me is a well-adjusted, because it's going to go half the movement touch, the other half push. Let's compare it with this. We can move them in slow motion. Let's move them in slow motion. They all kind of touch at the same point. See that? They all touch at the same time, and they all push to the same degree. Touch, push. Touch at the same time, push. So it's about a switch contacts width distance on each. I am really OCD about my gapping, and this is something that you really want to be very picky about, because it is, that is on. That is as consistent as can be. Now for this guy on the end here, let's look at that. Let's compare this with this. Let's move it in slow motion. Let's see if this separates at the same time this one touches. Because these three are good now. Let's look at that. No, it let go a little earlier than that actually touched it. So, this adjustment will be done with the switch open. I need to move it in a little closer. So I hold the relay open, and I'm going to adjust it. Now sometimes these switches are so close together, it's difficult to adjust, because you'll wind up pushing this one, like kind of eliminating that stack bias like I am here, unless you have an exceptionally thin tool. So there are other ways of getting around that. You can actually, you can push the switch with your finger if you have the dexterity to do it. Oh my gosh, I can't even get in here. Sometimes I'll just use a screwdriver to do it. It really doesn't matter how you do it, as long as you just push it at the base of the switch. And I am touching the other switch a little bit. One other way you can do it, and it's one of these alternative methods, is that you can actually grab it. This is one of those examples where you could grab it up there, and you could give it a little bend, but don't do that. Actually, I shouldn't have told you that, because that's kind of an advanced technique for when, let's say, you have switch contacts faces that aren't touching one another exactly. And so, for example, if you have a switch contact here, and you have another one that's like this, and they're touching like that, they're kind of not touching in the middle, by bending the top of the blade, you can then cause the contacts to meet face to face. So it's not really a big deal. The main thing is, I'm just doing this so that the 50-50 rule, I'm getting the full action of the wipe at the end. So if this were in this situation, I'm going to go ahead and just do it the old-fashioned way, the regular way. And it's going to bend that switch a little bit. That's okay, though. That's okay. You still have enough bias. You still have enough movement. it's still pushing against that part. Let's check it. Let's check it. Okay. Again, I gotta get back in here. A double throw. I guess we'll have to cover that in another example when I have one. Let's just keep it in the basics today. But good question, Greg. You're talking about a double throw, meaning like an either or. That would be half of the movement gets you from touching to in the middle of the two, and then the other half would be pushing the other way. So it's like, yeah, you're kind of 25% touch, 25% the middle, 25% the other, and then don't worry about that though. We'll talk about that later. So, oh, now I got it stuck back behind that piece of wood. Okay. All right, let's look at it. There. Yep, hands it off right at that point. So you see, this follows 50%, 50%. They all change state, and then it opens. There you go. That is a well-adjusted, and you can do it in fast motion. You do it in slow motion, kind of check how well it's doing. You still feel that the relay is returning. There's not too much pressure pushing up. You know, it doesn't take too much pressure to push that thing up. It's doing just fine. It's returning all the way to the top. Sometimes your relays, if the spring is messed up or these blades are messed up, it could be that it's not going all the way to the top. It could be that it's kind of going, doesn't really return all the way. So this will eliminate that. Anyway, and the white paper, yes, is a good tip. So that is, to me, a centered, polished, adjusted, wiping, clean relay is smoothed, good relay. And if you do them all like this, then probably 98%, 99% of your machine is going to work, and you plug it in, and then the rest is just going to be finessing little things like playfield switches or, you know, little finessing work. But in general, this is the genesis of understanding EMs. I took a long time to explain how to do just one, but that's because there's so much nuance here. So remember everything. Take it all apart, clean it up, bias the switches, do all that. Yep, only 100 more to go, exactly. But it goes pretty quickly when you do that. So, any questions? Explain the parts. Switch, biscuit, coil, biscuit. I call them biscuits, whatever. Armature. Click, 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 click. Yep. I don't want to bog people down too much with the nomenclature. It's more of a just getting your hands on it. And that's the main thing. We got to encourage people to get your hands on it and to get familiar with how it should feel. Everything lined up, everything clean. So you feel ready to rebuild some of these? You think so? What do you think? We can come back to that later. Yep. Anyway. Whew. So, this is it. Another night at the museum. This is what we do. More EM. Yes, we can do more. Other parts of the motherboard. Yeah, we can go over like score motor things. Yeah. Really all this is you got to be careful because these lifters can get knocked off. You don't want to just jam your Dremel in there and, you know, kind of take these off sequentially and clean them up. But just focus on relays first and just figure out how to do those perfectly and just get your fingers familiar with the process of doing them 100%. And I mean, that is, you know, the brains of an EM are the relays. That's the programming. So that really is kind of the most fundamental, important part of it. So good. So we will be doing, I guess, more in the future at some point, if you enjoyed. There's lots more to talk about. We can talk about, you guys know, we can talk about
We got stories. We got to tell them. But today, what time is it? Oh my God, 10:15. I'm out of here. Everybody, thanks for being a guest at the Roanoke Pinball Museum, and I guess soon to be Nick's Pinball B&B as soon as I get my roof redone and the Arabian tent put in that will overlook the games. So anyway, all right, kids, over and out. Keep the faith.